We've all done it. You look up at the night sky and just wonder, who are we? How did all of this even get here? It feels like we're hardwired to ask these huge questions about where the universe came from. So let's get into it, because one of the world's greatest thinkers had a really surprising response to that exact question. So, about 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha was teaching, people came to him with these same big questions. You know the ones, the real head scratchers. Is the universe eternal? Or did it just pop into existence? Is it infinite? Or is there an edge somewhere? These are the kinds of questions that philosophers have been wrestling with forever. And his followers, they wanted answers. And what was the Buddha's response to all this? He said, absolutely nothing. He just sat there in what's famously called his noble silence. Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds super frustrating, right? I mean, you travel all this way to see a great teacher, you ask the biggest question you can think of, and you get silence. But here's the thing. This wasn't him dodging the question. It was actually the start of a much deeper lesson. To explain why he was silent, the Buddha did what so many great teachers do. He told a story. It's a really powerful metaphor that people have talked about for centuries, known as the parable of the poisoned arrow. And this story, well, it's the key to the whole thing. Okay, so picture this. A man gets shot by a poisoned arrow. It's bad. He's in critical condition. A doctor rushes over, ready to pull the arrow out and save the guy's life, but the man puts up his hand and says, "Whoa, hold on. Before you take that out, I have some questions. Who shot me? What was his social class? Was he tall, short? And this arrow, what kind of wood is it? What feathers are on the back?" And all the while, the doctor is pleading with him, saying, "Look, while you're asking all these questions, the poison is spreading. You're going to die." So here's the punchline. The Buddha was saying that asking about the universe's origin is just like the wounded man's questions. He taught that all of us, right now, are in a state of urgency. We've been struck by the arrow of suffering, and speculating about cosmology doesn't help get the arrow out. As the teaching goes, these questions are philosophical luxuries that the human condition cannot afford. First things first, deal with the immediate problem. But hold on, this doesn't mean Buddhism has zero to say about the cosmos. Oh, it definitely does. But it offers a completely radical alternative to the ideas most of us grew up with. It's not about a single Big Bang or a moment of creation, but something more like a giant, shimmering, interconnected web. The core teaching here is a concept called pratitī samuppada. I know, it's a mouthful. It's Sanskrit for dependent origination. It's a huge idea in Buddhism, and it's actually pretty straightforward. It just means that everything, and I mean literally everything, comes into being because of other things. Nothing just exists all on its own. When the right conditions are there for something, it appears. When those conditions go away, it vanishes. Simple as that. And when you really think about it, this flips our whole view of reality on its head. In this model, there's no single first cause, no creator god standing outside of it all who lit the fuse. Instead, the universe is just this endless, beginningless dance of cause and effect. So, from a Buddhist point of view, even asking the question, who made it, is starting on the wrong foot. It assumes there's a who in the first place. And what's so cool about this idea of interdependence is that it doesn't just apply to galaxies and stars. It scales right down to you and me, to our own personal experience. In fact, it completely changes how we think about our own minds. One of the most famous Buddhist texts, the Dhammapada, kicks off with this incredibly powerful line. It puts the mind front and center. It's not just saying that our thoughts influence our actions, it's saying something much more profound, that our thoughts literally build the world that we experience. Okay, this is a really important point because it's so easy to get this wrong. This idea doesn't mean that the world out there is just an illusion or that you can just think $1 million into your bank account. It's way more subtle than that. What it does mean is that the quality of our mind fundamentally shapes our experience of reality. Think about it. A mind simmering with anger sees threats and insults everywhere. A mind that's been trained in compassion can be in the exact same situation and experience connection and understanding. We are, in a very real sense, co-creating our world from the inside out. So, when you put it all together, the silence, the parable of the arrow, this web of interdependence, you realize it all points back to one central, incredibly practical goal. It was never about having a perfect theory of everything. It's about having a practical guide for getting through life. At the end of the day, the Buddha wasn't trying to be an astrophysicist. He was trying to be a doctor for the human heart. What he offered wasn't a blueprint of the cosmos, but a map, a clear, step-by-step path to figure out what causes our own suffering and how we can bring that suffering to an end.
That was the emergency. That was the poisoned arrow that needed our full attention.
And just to give you a sense of how vast this thinking is, there's a core concept of impermanence called anicca, and it applies to everything, not just our moods or our bodies. In Buddhist cosmology, stars, planets, entire galaxies, and even the gods themselves are all seen as temporary. They arise, they exist for a while, and then they pass away. Nothing lasts forever. So it turns out the Buddha's famous silence wasn't a refusal to answer. It was really an invitation for us to ask a better, more useful question. He shifted the focus away from who created all this and pointed it directly at us, asking something much more urgent and personal. Okay, we're here. In this vast, interconnected, ever-changing reality, how do we navigate it with wisdom and compassion?